I was never the kind of person who liked to stir the pot. I preferred quiet victories, behind-the-scenes wins, and letting my actions speak louder than my voice ever could. My name's Samuel, I'm 27, and if you asked most people in my family, they'd say I was the quiet one. Not the golden child. That title belonged to my younger sister Ava, the living embodiment of our parents' every dream. No, I was the one who kept to himself, who never really fit the family vibe. Whatever that means. For years, I played my part. I showed up to birthdays with gifts I knew wouldn't get a thank you. I endured backhanded compliments from my mom about how techie stuff is cute, but not real work. Even after I landed a remote job in finance that paid more than my dad's did after 3 decades. I kept my mouth shut when they introduced Ava as our future lawyer, and then forgot to mention I'd just helped close a $2.5 million deal. And when Ava got engaged last fall, you better believe the family group chat exploded. Every message was a variation of, "Our little girl is getting married." Can you believe it? I could believe it. What I couldn't believe was how invisible I felt while reading all that. Still, I congratulated her. I called. I even sent her and her fiancé a gift, an engraved gold pen set, meant to symbolize signing your future together. I thought it was clever. Ava never responded. Not even a text. I figured it got lost in the wedding planning chaos. That's what I kept telling myself anyway. My relationship with my parents had always been complicated. They weren't cruel, just selective with their affection. They saw Ava as the reflection of themselves, polished, sociable, driven by appearances. I was the opposite, reserved, methodical, uninterested in clout or flashy status symbols. I didn't go to the Ivy League school they wanted. I didn't join the country club. I bought a modest townhouse instead of some luxury condo. And worst of all, I didn't include them in every detail of my life. But I thought we were past all that. I thought we'd settled into an understanding. I'd live my life, they'd live theirs, and we'd all smile at Thanksgiving. Until I got the text. It was a random Tuesday evening. I had just wrapped up a Zoom call with a client in Singapore, opened a bottle of red, and was halfway through a mediocre steak when my phone buzzed. It was my mom. "You're not welcome at the ceremony," the message read. "Ava's parents-in-law think you'd be awkward." I read it twice. 3 times. My first instinct was confusion. I scrolled up to check if I'd missed a prior message. Nope. That was it. No hi. No sorry. No explanation. Just a firm disinvitation wrapped in passive aggression. I stared at the words. The way awkward was framed in ellipses like I was some unpredictable wild card they had to keep locked away. I didn't even know how to respond at first. My chest tightened. Not with rage, at least not yet, but something closer to disbelief. I wasn't just excluded from the reception or asked to keep a low profile. I was flat out unwelcome. At my own sister's wedding. Because someone thought my presence might upset the aesthetic. I typed, "So image matters more than family," and hit send before I could second guess it. A few seconds later, the message was marked read. No reply. That silence said everything. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept looping through old family gatherings. Every time I paid for dinner, and they barely acknowledged it. Every birthday I showed up for only to feel like an outsider. Every conversation Ava dominated while I was told to let her have her moment. What kept me up wasn't just the rejection. It was the realization that I had been naive enough to think I mattered equally. That somehow, if I kept showing up, kept being dependable, they'd finally treat me like more than a footnote in Ava's golden biography. But here's the thing. I wasn't the same 17-year-old they used to talk over. I wasn't some shy college kid trying to prove himself. I was successful. Quietly, yes, but successful. And what they didn't know, what they had forgotten, was that they were standing on a foundation that I helped build. A very specific foundation that gave them the dream wedding venue, the designer catering, and even the luxury honeymoon fund. A foundation I owned, legally and financially. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Back when Ava got engaged, our mom had called me, gushing about her once-in-a-lifetime vision for the ceremony. She said it had to be perfect, grand but tasteful, elegant but youthful. I had tuned most of it out until she mentioned their biggest hurdle, funding. Ava's fiancé was still in grad school, and while her future in-laws were respectable, they weren't wealthy. My parents had dipped into retirement savings just to book the first deposits. So naturally, they turned to me. Just a short-term investment, my mom had said over speakerphone. You can write it off. And you'd be part of something truly beautiful. She didn't ask if I wanted to contribute. She assumed I would. And honestly, at the time, I didn't mind. I figured it'd be nice to do something generous, maybe even shift the family dynamic a little. What I didn't know was how forgettable my generosity would become. We set it up properly. Well, I did. I told them I'd front the cost through my LLC, so it was cleaner tax-wise. That way, all vendor contracts, deposits, and invoices would technically go through me. They agreed. They just wanted the money. And I gave it. Every last dime. Venue deposit? Covered. Custom flower arrangements from some boutique in Napa? Paid. A down payment on that ridiculous harpist who only played during sunset ceremonies? Yep. All in my name. They didn't even question it. Because in their eyes, I was just the bank. But now, after that text, after being told that I, Samuel, the brother, the son, wasn't good enough for their curated little spectacle, I sat on that thought for a few days. I didn't lash out. I didn't confront anyone. I let it simmer like a slow boil. Because if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that timing is everything. You don't react when you're emotional. You wait. You observe. You prepare. And then you move. I started digging through the wedding documents. The contracts, the authorizations, the payment receipts. I wanted to see just how deep their dependency went, and whether they even realized how precarious their little tower of perfection was. That's when I found something interesting. Not just one thing, multiple things. Quiet little clauses buried in the contracts that all pointed to the same truth. If I pulled out, the entire production would crumble. And they had no idea. They thought I was just the awkward one. I smiled. And then I made a call. Just one. I didn't make that call right away. I thought about it for 2 more days, replaying everything like a scratched record. The message, the silence, the years leading up to it. I told myself I didn't need to escalate. That maybe Ava would call, say it was a misunderstanding, tell me she wanted me there. Maybe Mom had sent that text in a moment of stress. Weddings were chaotic. People said things they didn't mean. But no call came. No apology. Nothing. And as the days passed, the more I saw the truth for what it was. This wasn't a one-time slight. It was the final move in a long, quiet campaign to box me out of the family, brick by brick, smile by forced smile. I spent the next weekend doing something I hadn't done in years. I scrolled through old photos. Birthdays, holidays, those blurry Christmas morning shots. And there I was in the corners, always slightly out of frame. Ava in the center, wrapped in a bow or holding the microphone or getting the last piece of cake. Even in group shots, I was the afterthought, standing to the side, kneeling in front, holding someone else's drink. And it wasn't just the pictures. It was the family vacation when I was 19 where they forgot to book me a room and told me I could just crash on the couch while Ava got the suite. It was the time my parents drove 4 hours to surprise her during finals with a care package and didn't even text me at my own college, one that was 30 minutes away. It was the way my dad introduced me at reunions. This is Sam. He works with computers or finance or something. Smart kid. Then he'd practically shout, "And this is our Ava. She's going to law school." It had always been that way. I just didn't want to see it. I kept hoping that one big gesture, one favor, one donation, one thoughtful gift might shift things, might earn me a seat at the same table. But instead, all it did was confirm to them that I'd never demand anything, that I'd give without question and disappear quietly when asked. And that, I realized, was exactly why they felt comfortable texting me that I was awkward and uninvited. Not even a phone call. Not even an attempt to pretend it was about capacity or logistics. Just, you don't fit. I didn't tell anyone what I was planning. Not yet. But I started taking mental inventory of what I actually meant to these people, beyond my wallet. It wasn't long before the next blow came. It was a Thursday evening, and I was halfway through reviewing quarterly numbers for a client when a knock came at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I saw a familiar figure, Uncle Ray. Now, Uncle Ray was one of the only relatives who ever treated me like a human being. He wasn't flashy. He worked as a mechanic for 30 years, loved football, and made killer ribs. He never picked sides in the family hierarchy, but he always made time for me, even when others didn't. "Got a minute?" he asked, holding up a 6-pack. I nodded and let him in. We sat on the back patio, the sun just starting to dip below the rooftops. After a few minutes of silence, he finally spoke. "Samuel, I heard about the wedding." I raised an eyebrow. "What about it?" He gave me a look, the kind that said, "Don't play dumb." They're telling everyone you're not coming because you don't support Ava's relationship, that you've always been jealous, that you made things tense at the engagement party. I blinked. What? I figured it was crap, he said. But it's spreading. Your mom told your Aunt Jan that you made Ava cry, said you criticized her fiancé's career path, then said you pulled out of the ceremony because you were bitter she's getting married before you. I felt my stomach twist. That was the game now? Rewriting the narrative before I could speak. I didn't even go to the engagement party, I said slowly. I was in San Diego on business. Ray nodded. I know, but no one's bothering to fact-check. You've always been quiet. Makes it easy for them to fill in the blanks. I stared into my drink. My jaw clenched so hard I felt my molars ache. They think I'll stay quiet, I muttered. Ray just nodded again. That night, I sat at my desk and pulled out every document I had connected to the wedding. I had itemized records of every wire transfer, every signed vendor agreement, every clause and condition. The catering deposit alone was 20 grand, and the refund clause allowed for cancellation up to 72 hours before the event. The harpist required a signed performance release, my signature. The venue required the payee, me, to confirm final guest numbers by a specific date or forfeit the time slot. They had built their entire fantasy wedding on my foundation, and they didn't even bother to hide the betrayal. Over the next week, I played nice. I didn't push. I didn't call or text. I just watched. They removed me from the wedding Facebook group. Ava blocked me on Instagram, probably to stop me from stealing her thunder. I got no invitation to the rehearsal dinner, though Uncle Ray told me it was being held at a private estate north of the city. Classy, expensive, and then the final slap. I was at my parents' house one Sunday evening, picking up some documents my dad had left behind in a mutual safety deposit box we shared from years ago. As I was getting ready to leave, my mom passed by the doorway and paused. By the way, she said, like it was nothing, we found someone to take over the rest of the payments. So you don't need to worry about it. I froze. What? The wedding? I know you were worried about expenses, she said with a patronizing smile. Ava's in-laws stepped up. We're all good now. I knew she was lying. Knew it by the way she wouldn't meet my eyes. No contract has been changed, I said. Everything's still under my LLC. She shrugged. Well, that's fine. As long as you're not getting involved anymore. That's when it hit me. They weren't just ignoring me. They were replacing me. Rewriting history in real time. Telling people I was unstable, selfish, dramatic. Telling Ava I didn't care. Telling the family I was jealous. They were cutting me out completely, while still standing on the money I gave them. I drove home in silence. I didn't even turn on the radio. That night, I pulled up every vendor contract again. One by one, I started making phone calls. Not to cancel. Not yet. Just to confirm exactly what I could do. And when. The venue? If I didn't provide final guest numbers and payment confirmation 2 weeks out, the reservation would be voided. The caterer? I could cancel with 72 hours notice and receive a partial refund. The harpist? Performance not guaranteed without signed release. And the videographer? Scheduled through my company. If I withdrew the team, no documentation would be delivered. No edits. No footage. Every piece. Every detail. They were all in my hands. And they didn't have a clue. But I wasn't going to throw the match just yet. No, I was going to wait. Let them bask in their own perfection. Let Ava post her countdown to the big day stories. Let my parents brag about the open bar and imported flowers. Let them hand out place cards and print custom napkins with their names in gold leaf. Because the best part of a house of cards falling apart is watching the moment they realize who pulled the bottom piece. And I already had that piece in my pocket. I just needed the right moment to drop it. It's strange how fast your own family can make you feel like a stranger in your own life. One moment you're offering help, trying to show up for them in the only way you know how. And the next, you're watching from the sidelines while they rewrite your story without you in it. After that conversation with my mom, if you can even call it a conversation, I didn't just feel excluded. I felt erased. They didn't just cut me out of the wedding. They cut me out of the narrative entirely. For the first few days after that, I went dark. I stopped checking the family group chats, didn't answer any calls, even from Uncle Ray. I logged off work early, ignored emails, didn't bother with my meal prep or gym routine. I just let myself float. I'd always prided myself on keeping it together, being the dependable one, the calm one, the quiet fix-it guy in a family full of noise and drama. But now I was exhausted. I didn't have it in me to pretend like this didn't break something inside me. I wasn't angry yet. I was just tired. Tired of being disposable. I let myself sit in that for a while. I ordered takeout every night. Always too much food, and left the dishes in the sink. I slept at odd hours and stopped shaving. It wasn't a dramatic spiral, just a quiet unraveling. I wasn't used to being the problem in someone else's story. And now that I apparently was, I had no idea how to act. The worst part was that I still kept checking my phone. Every few hours, I'd open it without thinking, half hoping, half dreading a message from Ava. An apology, maybe, or even just a crappy excuse. Something like, sorry things got out of hand. I didn't mean for you to be uninvited. But the silence was total. Cold. Clinical. The girl I grew up with, who used to beg me to braid her hair, who used to sneak into my room to watch cartoons when she was scared at night, was gone. Or maybe that version of her never really existed. Maybe I just saw what I wanted to see. It took about a week of this limbo before I finally reached out to someone. Not family, definitely not them. I texted Kira. Kira and I had dated briefly about a year and a half ago. We didn't work out romantically, different timelines, different goals, but we'd stayed close. She was a landscape architect, always busy, always sketching or traveling for a site visit. But she had this calm energy about her that made people open up. I didn't even plan what I'd say. I just texted her. Got time for a drink? She replied in 5 minutes. Absolutely. You okay? I wasn't. But I wanted to be. We met up at this quiet rooftop bar downtown, somewhere far from the usual haunts where my family might show up. I hadn't seen Kira in months, but she hugged me like it had been days. You look like hell, she said, smiling gently. Appreciate the honesty. We ordered drinks, sat under a string of glowing bulbs, and I told her everything. The text, the lies, the disinvitation, the part where they used my money and then made me the villain. I didn't cry, but my voice cracked a few times. More than I expected. She didn't interrupt, just listened. When I finally finished, she leaned back and let out a low breath. Damn, yeah, they always been like that. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I just didn't want to see it. She was quiet for a second. Then, so what now? I shrugged. I don't know. I have all the control, technically. I could pull everything. Cancel the venue, cut off the vendors, let it all collapse. And believe me, I've thought about it. But part of me still wants to be seen by them. Not for revenge. Just, for once, I want them to acknowledge what I gave. What I meant. Like maybe if I pull the plug, they'll finally realize what they lost. Kira sipped her drink and looked me dead in the eye. Samuel, they already know. They just don't care. That hit harder than anything else I'd heard. And it was the truth. They knew who I was. What I'd done. They just didn't want it to count. I stayed quiet for a while after that. Then I asked her something I hadn't even admitted I was struggling with. Do you think I'm just hard to love? Kira looked at me for a long time. Not with pity, just with this quiet, focused kindness I wasn't used to. I think you were raised by people who didn't know how to love anything they couldn't control. You made yourself small for them. And now that you stopped, they're punishing you for it. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Stop shrinking. That night, something shifted. I went home and cleaned my apartment top to bottom. I shaved. I organized my files. I made an actual grocery list. And for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. The next morning, I woke up with this strange clarity. Like a fog had finally lifted. I didn't need to be part of their wedding. I didn't need to be at that ceremony, sitting at the distant cousin table, pretending to be happy while they toasted each other for pulling off a fairy tale. What I needed was to take back my narrative. Quietly, strategically, with purpose. So I started rebuilding. Not with grand gestures or petty revenge, yet. Just with routine. I re-engaged with work. Hard. I took on a new project that had been sitting in my inbox for weeks. A fintech startup looking to restructure their budgeting systems. The kind of thing I used to eat up before everything got cloudy. I put in 12-hour days, but it felt good. Sharp. Focused. I started running again too. Nothing crazy, just a few miles each morning, but it helped clear my head. And I stopped checking my phone. If they wanted to reach me, they could, but I wasn't going to chase them anymore. A few weeks passed. The wedding was creeping closer. I kept tabs on things, not obsessively, just enough to know the timeline. I monitored the vendor contracts quietly, making notes on deadlines and refund thresholds. But mostly, I kept my head down and built my life back. Kira and I started hanging out more, platonic, but warm. She had this way of making everything feel grounded. We'd meet up on Sundays, grab coffee, walk through the park. She never pushed, never pried, just gave me space to be myself. And in that space, I realized something. I had always been enough. I just happened to be born into a family that couldn't see it. One night, about a month before the wedding, I got an email from the venue. A simple reminder, final guest list and payment confirmation due in 7 days or reservation will be released per contract terms. I stared at it for a long time. They hadn't reached out. No one had asked me to confirm. No one had mentioned my name in any update. I was still ghosted. They were either assuming I'd stay quiet, or they were gambling I didn't have the guts to follow through. I flagged the email and let it sit. 6 days passed. Still nothing. No calls. No texts. No messages. Not even a just checking in from Ava or a guilt trip from Dad. On the 7th day, I opened my laptop. I took a deep breath, and I hovered over the reply button. That's when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered. Hello. There was a pause. Then, Sam, it's Grace, Ava's maid of honor. I blinked. I'd met Grace once, maybe twice. She was the type of person who posted Instagram stories of every brunch and called herself a vibes curator. Hey, I said cautiously. What's up? She laughed nervously. So weird thing. I was trying to finalize some seating stuff for the reception, and Ava mentioned something about you handling the venue, but then she said you weren't involved anymore. This might be awkward, but do you have, like, the invoice or something? We're trying to finalize headcount, and I cut her off. I'm still listed on the contract, I said. Technically, no one else can finalize anything without my confirmation. Silence. Ava didn't mention that. I bet she didn't. I'll tell you what, I said calmly. Have Ava call me directly. We can figure it out. Grace was flustered. Right? Yeah, totally. I'll let her know. She hung up fast. I stared at the phone for a long time. It had begun. They needed me, but they still hadn't reached out. And that was going to cost them. Because what they didn't know was that I already had a plan. I had already pulled one of the contracts. Not the venue. Not the caterer. Something smaller. Something that wouldn't set off alarms. But enough to shake the foundation. Let's rewind a bit. Before Grace called me, before the venue reminder email, before I even cleaned my apartment and started jogging again, I had already set the first piece in motion. It happened late one night, maybe 2 days after Uncle Ray came over. I couldn't sleep. I was still stuck in that weird mental limbo between heartbreak and quiet rage, flipping through wedding planning documents on my laptop like they were crime scene files. That's when I saw the vendor I had forgotten all about, the ice sculpture artist. Yes, an actual ice sculptor. Because, apparently, Ava wanted a custom swan centerpiece that would melt gracefully during the reception, symbolizing the beauty and fragility of love. I wish I was making that up. The invoice wasn't large, only a couple $1,000s, but the artist was temperamental. His contract had a specific clause that stood out to me now, bolded and underlined. Sculpture cannot be altered, rescheduled, or finalized without written confirmation from the original client by date. If confirmation is not received by deadline, agreement is void and deposit non-refundable. The deadline was 3 days away. I sat back in my chair. I could have ignored it, let it expire, but something about it was just poetic. This fragile, ridiculous symbol of their fairy tale melting away, not at the reception, but before it ever arrived. So I emailed the artist and said I was withdrawing the order. No swan, no sculpture, keep the deposit. He didn't argue, said he'd been booked up anyway and was relieved to have one less commitment. And just like that, a small piece of the wedding fell quietly out of place. No one noticed, but it made me feel something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. That was the moment I realized something big. I didn't need to ruin the wedding with one dramatic blow. I didn't need to be explosive. I didn't want scorched earth. What I wanted was for the entire thing to collapse under the weight of its own lies. Quietly, strategically. So I started planning. I pulled up every contract, every timeline, every clause. I made a spreadsheet. Vendor names, deadlines, cancellation terms, refund amounts, points of contact, backup plans, the works. Then I sorted them into 3 categories. Soft pulls, minor things I could cancel or withdraw that wouldn't raise alarms, but would start to inconvenience the event. Critical fails, services that, if pulled, would create chaos. These included the catering, transportation, and most importantly, the venue itself. Delays and distractions, elements that wouldn't cancel the wedding but would throw the planning into disarray. The custom seating arrangement software, licensed through me, the photographer's editing turnaround, contracted under my LLC, and the imported floral arch that required my final approval to ship. Now, here's the thing about revenge. It tastes better when it's earned. I wasn't going to unleash this all at once. I wanted them to feel safe, confident. I wanted them to post their countdowns, brag to their friends, walk into that rehearsal dinner thinking they'd won. And then, click, I'd pull the rug out from under them. But to do that, I needed help. So I called Uncle Ray. He answered on the first ring. "You all right?" he asked. "Better now," I said. "But I need to ask you something, and it might put you in a weird position." "I'm listening." I told him the basics. Not everything, just enough. That I was still technically in control of the wedding infrastructure. That they were using my money, my company, my name. And that they had no clue how close they were to losing it all. Then I asked the big question. "Can you keep your ear to the ground? Let me know what they're saying. If they suspect anything?" Ray didn't even hesitate. "You got it." I trusted him. He wasn't just doing it out of loyalty. He'd seen this family operate long enough to understand the dynamics. He knew what it was like to be shoved to the side when you didn't fit their narrative. And honestly, I think he wanted to see it fall too. Over the next couple of weeks, he fed me intel. Ava's fiancé's family had no idea I was funding everything. They were told my parents had connections with a generous investor who helped secure the venue. Ava spun it as a kind of Cinderella story, her humble roots, the fairy godmother funding, and the perfect day coming together through destiny and grit. Disgusting. Meanwhile, my parents doubled down on the lie that I had pulled out early and wasn't coming because I didn't support the marriage. They even told a few relatives that I had gone a bit off lately and was overly sensitive. Every time Ray told me this, I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it confirmed exactly what I needed. They weren't just entitled. They were arrogant. They genuinely believed they could throw me away and still keep the house I built. I gave them rope. Then I started yanking it. First, I emailed the catering company and asked to adjust the menu. Just minor things. Remove the shrimp appetizer, swap out the champagne tier. I claimed the client had dietary concerns. This triggered a mandatory reconfirmation email back to the listed contact, me, along with a request for updated payment details. I didn't respond. This triggered a hold on the service. No food, no drinks, not without updated confirmation. 3 days later, I got a panicked email from the caterer asking if the event was still on. I told them to hold tight. We were revisiting the structure. Translation, let them sweat. Then I contacted the flower distributor. The imported arch Ava wanted, hand-selected from a specialty nursery in the Netherlands, required phytosanitary clearance and customs processing. But my approval was missing. They wouldn't ship without it. I didn't approve. Strike 2. Then I logged into the wedding seating software, the one I had licensed to Ava's wedding planner for free under my LLC. I revoked the license. The planner messaged me in a panic. I told her the software was under maintenance and might be unavailable for an extended period. She wasn't happy. Ava would be even less. But I wasn't done. The next piece came from Ray. He told me Ava had started to worry. Little things were slipping. The harpist never confirmed her set list. The seating chart kept crashing. The florist went silent. And the caterer, who Ava hadn't spoken to directly at all, still hadn't sent a final tasting confirmation. They were too proud to admit they were losing control. Too confident I wouldn't retaliate. I wanted to laugh. But I waited. The rehearsal dinner was 2 weeks away. I planned to wait until the last minute. But then, something shifted. Uncle Ray called me one night. Said my mom was at brunch with some extended relatives. Bragging. She said you were so unstable lately. It was a blessing you weren't coming. Said you might have ruined the photos or made a scene. And get this. She said you're lucky they didn't sue you for harassment over the ice sculpture cancellation. My jaw locked. That was it. I had given them every chance. Given them silence. Given them grace. Now I was done giving. So I moved up the timeline. I drafted 6 emails. 1 to the venue, confirming cancellation due to unforeseen complications. 1 to the catering company, formally terminating the agreement. 1 to the florist, canceling the import permit. 1 to the photographer, requesting they stand down. 1 to the transportation company, rescinding the wedding shuttle service. And 1 to Ava, But I didn't send hers yet, because I wanted her to find out the hard way first. I scheduled the vendor emails to go out 72 hours before the rehearsal dinner. Just enough time to ruin everything, but not enough to fix it. 72 hours before the rehearsal dinner, the emails went out. No dramatic subject lines. No gloating. Just clean, professional language. Due to a change in circumstances, we are terminating the service agreement, effective immediately. Per clause 4.2 of the contract, payment was non-refundable, and the event is no longer proceeding as initially scheduled. Do not proceed with any further work. Please confirm receipt. 6 messages. 6 dominoes. And then, I waited. I didn't check my phone obsessively, didn't pace the room or wring my hands like I thought I might. Instead, I spent that morning on a walk, the kind where the sun hits the pavement just right and the world feels like it's humming in time with your heartbeat. I bought myself coffee. I even stopped at a bookstore and picked up a new journal. That afternoon, I opened my laptop, went into the shared drive I'd created for the wedding vendors, and deleted it. It was quiet, efficient, cold, just like they had been. And then, the phone calls started. I let them all go to voicemail. The first came from the wedding planner, then 2 more from unknown numbers, 1 from the caterer's assistant. By evening, Ava's name lit up my screen in rapid succession. Calls, FaceTime attempts, even a few texts that started out vague. Sam, please, call me back. This is urgent. Then they got angrier. What the hell did you do? Are you insane? I swear to God, if you don't fix this. I didn't respond. Not yet, because the real firestorm was still coming. By midnight, the emails had clearly reached the entire family. My dad's number popped up. My mom's. I let them all rot in missed calls. I didn't want an apology. I wanted them to sit in the consequences. Feel every bit of the silence they had once shoved down my throat. The next morning, I finally called one person, Uncle Ray. He picked up sounding equal parts exhausted and delighted. They're in shambles, he said. I mean, Samuel, it's like someone set a grenade off in their group chat. Your mom's losing her mind. Ava's threatening legal action. I actually laughed. Let her. I have the contracts. Every receipt. Every agreement. You do realize they're trying to pin this on you now, right? Of course, I said calmly. That's the best part. Because here's the thing. I never once said I was canceling the wedding. I simply terminated the services I was contracted to, which meant they weren't suing a malicious brother out of spite. They were begging to fix a broken system they never bothered to understand. They had no backups, no alternative contacts, no financial trail that included Ava or my parents. Every major piece of that wedding was tangled up in me. They just never thought I'd pull the plug. But I did. And now the fairy tale had no catering, no venue, no flowers, no music, no shuttle, and no time to fix it. But I wasn't quite finished. There was one last thing I had to do. So I finally opened my text thread with Ava. I typed slowly, carefully. You asked me not to come to your wedding because I would be awkward. Then you used me for everything. Told lies. Rewrote history. I stayed quiet. I let it go. But here's the truth. Ava, I was never the problem. I was your solution. And now that I'm gone, you finally see what that means. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity. I hit send. Then I blocked her. That night, I turned off my phone completely. Made a nice dinner. Poured a glass of wine. Slept like a rock. The following morning, Ray called me again. You need to hear this, he said, and played a voicemail he'd received from my dad. Apparently, they had scrambled all night trying to salvage what they could. Ava's fiancé's family was furious, embarrassed, blindsided, and threatening to pull their own support. Word was spreading through the extended relatives. My mom tried to pivot the narrative again, claiming it was my instability that caused the mess. But too many people knew now. Too many vendors had forwarded email trails. Too many receipts had my name on them, not hers, not Ava's. And just like that, the story started to shift. Suddenly, I wasn't the bitter brother anymore. I was the guy who held the whole thing together and then walked away. Not out of rage, but because they made me a ghost and forgot that ghosts can still haunt. The wedding didn't happen that weekend. They tried to hold a small ceremony in a relative's backyard with fold-out chairs and homemade decorations, but most of the guests bailed. The vibe had soured. The story had leaked. And you know what? That was the most satisfying part. It wasn't about destroying their day. It was about watching them struggle to replace what they never appreciated in the first place. They thought they could control the narrative. but I wrote the ending. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. A handwritten one from my mom. The handwriting was shaky, like she didn't know how to sound genuine, but was trying. It read, "Samuel, we were hurt. Shocked. We never thought you'd take it this far. But after hearing what happened, I suppose I understand. I won't say sorry yet because I don't know if you'd believe me. But I hope one day you'll come back to the family. Love, Mom." I folded the letter once and slid it back into the envelope. No return address. No apology. Just damage control disguised as remorse. I never responded. Because I didn't need to. I had already said everything they needed to hear. Not with words, but with silence. And silence, it turns out, is the loudest kind of revenge. They erased me from their wedding, so I erased their wedding from existence.